Weston, do you want to?
All right.
Should we move on? And
Speaking of my students, that's actually what kind of inspired my topic today. For the past week and a half-ish, I've had non-stop emails from students asking me, like, what kind of components do I need in laptops? What kind of components do I need in a computer? What do I need for this class? What do I need for this? Mm-hmm. Hey, I'm actually not in your program, but I know that since you teach the subject, could you recommend what I would need in a computer to do this? Mm-hmm. I have answered so many emails about what to put into a computer that I figured I'd come here, I'd kind of explain it to, discuss it with some of my comrades here. Dan here is going to sit off on the side, and he's going to draw his nice
I'll try to take
artworks.
No. We'll see
but
I feel like this is going to be
I can't really draw, so we'll
me and you heavy conversation.
It really is.
I feel like the wings are going to kind of,
get some rest in here.
Yeah.
Some scrap here.
Oh, and he's finding the accordion Post-its.
Oh, yeah, there they are.
There we go.
Logan has more paper than you.
Now it's Logan art.
That's not right.
See,
it's smaller and it's yellow. I don't care.
Okay. Anyways, what exactly, Ranger? That's not a laser pointer, bud.
The thing I always need to explain to my students is first and foremost is the fact that instead of asking me, like they're often asking me what do they need, it's like the first thing I need to tell you is there's not a specific computer that I can recommend. It's what is in the computer. What are the actual specifics? What are the technical specs that they need?
Yeah.
So first thing I tell them, if we're going to be in the computer programming class, they get one responsive course. And if they're in the game design class, they get another. If they're in the game design class, I start with the GPU. If they're in this computer programming, I start with the CPU and then RAM. Because depending on what you're doing, they're very different.
The RAM.
No matter what you are,
you need
RAM.
Dedicated WAM.
Dedicated?
Oh, you need more than just the dedicated WAM.
Dedicated WAM to Sova. Don't forget.
Gotcha.
Memes never die.
But regardless. So,
not for you.
If you are going to be doing lots of actual work on a computer, the first thing I'm going to recommend is to look at the CPU. The more cores, the more you can do at one time. What you should do is you should imagine each core as being an individual employee in an office. Okay? The component they all need is a mouse. Actually, that's not entirely true.
Trap hats suck.
I was actually going to say there are also eye tracking stations that I've used in the past.
Okay,
they suck,
bud.
But you don't need a mouse. You see, you're saying they need it. It is preferable to have it, but that is not a requisite. A CPU, that is requisite. Am I wrong?
No, you're not wrong. I just love how that got you fired up.
I'm sorry. I deal with this for my students all the time.
Like the fact that out of everything that could have been said, that's what got you fired up.
I have students who ask these questions all the time, so I'm always ready with these responses. You know?
Yeah.
And also, I do train my students to go through everything without even touching their mouse.
Do you train in the mountains?
Yes. Okay. I take them into the mountains of Iowa Lakes Community College, and I make them train without using mouse.
Now, where are those at? And also, wouldn't it be mice?
Actually, no. You would think it's mice. However, in computer science terminology, it is actually mouses because they are not proper mice. Does that make sense? Also, another thing that really got me about computer science was typically, if you say like there's an index, what would you call the plural? You would say they're indices. However, in computer science, you actually call them indexes, which is really weird. It messed with me.
Makes perfect sense to me.
So, yeah, there are some things that just get me. Okay,
Weston is going to be so mad at me by the end of this.
What else is new?
But regardless, so the more cores you can get, the better. Would you agree with that so far?
Yes, absolutely.
And then,
to a certain extent,
there is a point where they have discovered that if you have too many cores, it takes too long for them to actually communicate with each other and actually slows everything down.
Because it depends on what you're doing. If you're strictly gaming, I'd rather have 8 cores at a higher clock speed than 32 at a slower. So it depends on what you're using the computer for itself.
And how many things you need to do at once. If you're really just doing the one thing, yeah, you don't need a whole bunch.
Hey,
now,
hold up. Ranger, go. Go, Range. I knew he wasn't going to listen to Logan, so.
I mean, who does listen to Logan?
He's starting to cry. I don't know if you guys were able to hear it, but he was starting to whine and cry. Actually, Logan, since you're going to be quiet most of this conversation, do you want to let him out in the backyard and see if he has to pee?
Don't do that.
Do not reduce yourself to that level.
Well, someone's going to have to do it, and I just figured if you want
Maybe
someone
his owner.
Do you want someone to talk to during this conversation?
He can talk to himself.
I could talk to the audience here, you know? My viewers are intelligent.
Okay, so as we were saying though, like it depends on the use case, obviously.
You're right. For gaming or for common use, I would say 8 cores is the most anybody would actually need.
I have 12 in my computer.
I said the most that they would need. Now, could you have more if you wanted? Yes.
Did you already put them out?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
But what do you need? I could see you needing up to 8. I could see that. Especially if you're doing some level of editing, okay? I don't think you would necessarily need more than 8 cores, even if you're doing some level of video editing, though you
honestly, editing the videos that I do, you very easily could get away with 8 cores.
That's what I'm saying.
Absolutely.
So I'm not going to sit here and push any further on that. The next most important component that I recommend to my students is the RAM. Okay? And I see a question here about cores or threads. I recommend cores.
Yeah, 8 cores.
What I'm going to say is this. Imagine each core as an employee in an office. And then each of the threads are kind of like a hand of what they can be doing. Does that make sense? They can, like, if you try to do 2 things at once, sometimes you can do it, but your brain's only thinking of one thing at a time. But if you have more cores, that's more workers in there to get more done. Does that make sense? Now, that's not a perfect analogy, of course, but that's just to kind of help you get an idea of what's going on in there. So.
And you guys know you can listen to him more than anyone because he is actually a professional instructor.
It's true. I have degrees in this stuff.
This is his speciality.
Forte.
Yeah, there you go. That's another word.
It is a word. You should try reading the dictionary once. It's actually not that bad.
I actually tried learning the dictionary one time. I was going to read through the whole thing, but for whatever reason, I got to N and I learned next to nothing and decided to give up.
I approve of your pun there. I approve of it. So, RAM. We're going to ram forward with this conversation.
Okay, let's do it. Let's do it.
So, for RAM, the more, the better, is really
Yes.
the simplest way to put that. For the common computer, though, do not go below 16. I know a lot of places are going to say, like, you can do 8 or whatever. Not on a Windows.
It's
not
like
on a Windows.
those laptops me and you just saw at Walmart tonight with 4. They were selling laptops at Walmart with 4 gigs of RAM, and I wanted to cry, dude.
You wanted to cry? Try being me, who has to explain to students who bring in those with 4 gigabytes of RAM, like, yeah, that isn't actually going to cut it in this program.
Oh, absolutely not. My laptop has 16, and
Get
that's
what
not
you
even
pay
enough.
Mm-hmm. So, if anybody watches this, do not get less than 16 gigabytes of RAM. Otherwise, your operating system is just going to eat away at it. I know Windows likes to say, oh, we only use a couple gigabytes of it. That is a blatant lie, okay? That is a blatant lie.
When you're talking to the audience here, are you assuming that they are gaming? Are you assuming that they are video editing? Like,
this doesn't matter what they're actually doing. The operating system is evil when it comes to RAM. Also, if you open a Google tab,
I mean, there's
that
also
is the end of the world for your RAM.
there on the play devil's advocate here. You could get Linux that hardly uses any RAM at all.
This is correct. However, the number of people who actually utilize Linux is less than 5%.
Oh, I know. I'm saying though, but you could
world,
theoretically you could get away with 8, even if you use Linux, because if you're using half a gig for RAM, that leaves
But if
plenty.
you looked at the ones that they were selling that we saw, were they using Linux?
They were Windows.
They were using Windows.
They were.
Windows were going to eat away at those.
I'm just playing devil's advocate because
I get that.
you argue
That's
me all
fair.
the time, so I'm going to sit here and I'm going to kind of
And
poke
the next
holes
thing
in
I'm
what
going
you're
to
saying.
argue then is how many people actually even know how to use a Linux operating system?
Not me.
Exactly. I have to teach my students what Linux even is for many cases. So I'm not going to assume most people in the audience are even thinking about Linux. Now, could you be? Yes, and if so, go for it. Linux is superior.
See,
Trust me.
there you go. Terraria is running a bot for my Twitch channel, and it's running on a computer with 2 gigs of RAM, and it's only using like 300 megs.
That's because Linux is superior. Don't let anybody ever tell you any different.
I'm sorry, what do your computers run on, sir?
I actually have computers that run on different things.
Do you have a Linux computer?
Yes, I do.
I did not know that.
I have actually 2 Linux computers. One that utilizes Ubuntu. No, I got rid of the Ubuntu version. I switched off with Debian because it's going to offer me more versatility. And then I also have a Kali version.
Okay. Yeah, at some point I want you to teach me Linux because I would like to run and I know I've talked to you about this before. I want to get a NAS server set up, but I want to get one, and my plan is to get the new Ryzen 5700G or whatever. It's 8 cores, 16 threads, but it has the integrated graphics, so I don't need the GPU. But I want to run a couple Minecraft servers on half of it, and then the other half would be a NAS server. So obviously needing, running VMs and stuff, Linux would probably be the way to go. So I'm gonna want your help.
Far more efficient.
I'm gonna want your help setting that up because I trust you more than anybody with this. So.
No problem. No problem. And I see here that there was an edit of 3.36 gigabytes of total RAM. Yes, that is correct. When they say 4, that's never actually truly 4 because they have a certain amount of whatever storage just dedicated to some under the hood, like firmware and stuff like that. So you never actually get that full value out of it.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Because I got 32 gigs in both of my desktops. They both have 32, and honestly, I find myself using, even on just the gaming PC, not even the streaming one, I find myself using over half of it all the time. But now, that being said, that's because like when I'm playing Minecraft or something, I usually have 8 gigs assigned to just Minecraft. So I mean, that's half of it immediately gone, or half of the 16 being used is assigned to just that one program. But yeah, then Windows takes up what, usually 3.5, like 3 to 3.5 usually for Windows.
It depends on which version you have, like if it's Home or
I use Pro.
Pro.
So 3 to 3.5 probably on Windows 10 Pro.
And you can go up to 4 depending on what you're doing.
Yeah, and so I would never recommend less than 32 at this point because I find myself using more than 16 all the time.
However, you just also admitted that you have a constant running of Minecraft with 8 gigabytes in and of itself.
Yes.
Most people won't probably have that. So I can say with confidence they could probably get away with 16.
See, you can get away with it, but like you said,
but here's what I'm saying.
The more
that
the better.
Should be the lowest that you go.
Okay, if we're talking bare minimum, yes, I agree. Okay.
Do not go below 16 gigabytes of RAM.
So we're
the
talking.
The more you can get, though, the better.
Logan, does yours have 16 or 32? I don't remember what we put in it.
I can't remember what's on my head. I think.
Oh, Ranger's crying.
I think 16.
Is yours 16?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because my regular use one that I use.
This RAM's.
Okay.
My common use is going to be a 32 gigabyte RAM. My old one that I have just in case anything ever happens has 16 gigabytes. I know I have another one that I use for AI development, and it has 64 gigabytes.
That'd be
nice. And it utilizes... It pushes the boundaries of those 64. Let's just say that.
I don't know if that's even going to show up, Logan.
Oh, no.
Logan drew buff Pikachu.
He works out. So...
Do you even lift, bro?
That's RAM. Let's move on to GPUs.
Okay.
Because I'm sure that's something you would love to discuss as well a little bit. First off, the marketing is lying to you on some of this stuff. You don't need all the new high-end GPUs, okay? Now, I know right now there's supposedly some shortage going on and with silicon and stuff like that.
Oh, supposedly? Really?
I know.
Never would have guessed.
The thing I'm going to tell you, you don't need the high-end stuff to do gaming. Now, if you're going to do game development, that is a different story. Okay, there's a huge difference in there. If you're trying to run Unreal Engine or Unity Engine or one of those, that actually takes up a huge level of your VRAM.
See, I'm going to put a couple of my friends on blast here because they've done this and it kind of pisses me off. They have a 2 PC streaming setup, and all they do is they stream and they game. They don't do any game design. They don't do any video work that would require the extra GPU horsepower, and they play on, maybe a 1440p monitor, right? At the most, a high refresh 1440p.
So at the most, they should have like a 3060.
There's a couple of them. I'm not going to say names, but I'm going to put them on blast. You know who you are. They bought a 3090 for their gaming computer.
I make games, and I have a 2080 Super.
And I'm sitting here like, I told them multiple times that is the biggest waste of $1,000. Like, because I mean, they spent $2,000 on these cards. I'm like, if you want the power, get the 3080. It's going to perform in games just as well as the 3090, unless you're doing
Right
8K
now,
gaming.
you guys can get away with a 3070 and still do a lot of game development.
I have a
okay?
2070 in my gaming computer, and that runs everything just as well as I would ever hope.
I mean, like I said, I have the 2080 Super, and I am developing games at, oh gosh, the highest resolution my best monitor can handle is going to be 1440. So I'm developing it easily on that. It's tearing up the system. Like, it's so easy. He just tears through it, and it's good.
It won't brick with New World. That's true. Did you hear about that? Did you hear about it?
I heard about it.
It's actually blowing up $2,000 cards, like literally blowing them up.
That comes down to a couple
but the
different
Steam Deck
things,
can
though.
The Steam Deck can handle it. There you go. Don't even
But
get started.
regardless, you don't need all that. And for the New World, that actually came down to software settings.
It
that
did,
burned
but
it out.
the fact that they were literally starting cards on fire and like causing the
Honestly,
capacitors to explode.
they should be replacing those GPUs.
Oh, they absolutely should.
They
be.
absolutely should be.
Absolutely. It was mostly 3090s. I don't think I heard of any 3080s having that problem. I think it was just 3090s because they are taking up so much more power and they're creating so much more heat that those were the issues. But anyways, that's not here or now, I guess. That's a different topic for a
That
different
is
day.
a very different topic.
Just kind of pull us back, because we've already gone on this topic now for 15 minutes or so.
Mm-hmm. And I will say, storage. That's going to depend on what you're doing, of course.
Yep.
I always recommend get as much storage as you're going to need and probably double it, because you'd be surprised. You'd be surprised at how fast you go through that storage.
Oh, trust me, I have 6 terabytes in one of my computers, and it's almost full just because we put 50 gigabytes in every week just from this podcast alone. So that's something else I'm going to have to buy is I need to get like an 8 terabyte external drive or something.
And I will
I
say
don't know
this,
yet.
like if there's one thing that I buy on a regular basis, they're new storage drives.
Well, I would recommend for anyone building a computer, and I made sure Logan did this, is get some sort of an SSD no matter what. That's what your OS goes on. And then if you have to get, like a 2 terabyte spinning drive, even minimum 2 terabyte. I mean, I wouldn't go with the 1 because at this point you can get a 1 terabyte drive for $40 or a 2 terabyte for $45.
Yeah.
So spend the extra $5 and double it, right? But so anytime I build a computer for somebody, I always make sure I'm like, hey, even if it's a 256 gig drive, get some sort of an SSD, no matter what. Put your operating system on there, and maybe like if you're streaming, put OBS on there. Your most used tasks, obviously, the most used programs. The bigger, the better on the SSD, but the most used stuff put on there, and then all your games.
I get
and
that,
everything
but
on
also
it.
make sure they're not things that get consistently written and rewritten over and over again, because SSDs have a lifetime of how many times you can actually.
No,
rewrite
they do,
them.
and you're right, but
It's like 10 to 100,000 rewrites. It depends on the quality of the SSD.
But if you're like, let's say you're streaming, right? You don't want OBS to be using the same drive as the game, and you don't want you want to separate.
You want to.
So I always tell people take your your most used programs like an OBS Studio or something if you're streaming. 'Cause that's let's be real, that's what I do. And your video editor program, put it on there if you're video editing. And then if you have a big enough drive, what I do is I actually will use one as a scratch disk. So I'll load all of the stuff onto an SSD, and then I'll edit off of the SSD, and then when I'm done, I move it to the mass storage drive. So I'll keep a project on. So I mean, I know I'm going through the things quite a bit, but at the same time, it's like, they're getting cheap enough now to where you can get a 2 terabyte SSD for $150, which realistically is a lot cheaper than it was. I mean, heck, if you just get the 2.5 inch, you don't even get M.2, you can get one that's 2 terabytes for like $80-$90. So that's not bad. So if you're looking at it, if you happen to kill one because you edit thousands of videos, and you're gonna get your use out of that, for sure.
I was just gonna say, when we were talking about like distributing them out, just be aware that that's only if you're writing to those drives. Don't try to write to the same drive from multiple programs. Otherwise, they have to take turns because you only have one write arm per drive. Whereas
Drink your medicine,
everything
sir.
that you're actually running on your computer is all stored in RAM at the moment in time. So like if you open up OBS, that's actually opening up and being copied into your RAM, and that's where you're actually running it. When you're running your game, you're actually copying it from the appropriate files from the hard disk into your RAM, and that's where it's actually being run.
Yes.
Whatever's currently being run is in RAM. That's why the more RAM you have, the better.
And
So,
it will just randomly access it from that memory.
that's actually not what that actually means, but you are correct. That is what RAM stands for, but that's not actually
Random
what the-
access memory. You mean
what it actually
that
means is it
Daft
can
Punk
go in
album?
there and it can go anywhere.
Is that?
That's because
It's from Daft Punk.
Oh, is it really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Random access memories.
But I won't take too much time. I'm going to say this in passing, though. The motherboard is also super important. I kind of glossed over it here, but do not underestimate the importance of the motherboard as well.
To an extent.
Okay, it doesn't matter how good your CPU and your RAM are. If the motherboard can't keep up with the data buses, it doesn't matter.
Which nowadays is usually not a concern.
Usually being a keyword.
So, like, I wouldn't recommend you get an A320 board, but like a B450 or something would be fine.
It should be
Like
fine.
any
But-
mid tier, like as long as you're spending at least I'd say $120 or more, you'll be set. If you cheap out and go for like a $60 one,
I hate Dan. He's too good.
he's too good. I mean, he is an artist.
Are you
He
sure?
is.
No.
I
This-
used to be.
See, I like that so much better though. That's why it's free.
That's an abomination.
All right,
That's
I'm going to call
beautiful.
this for my topic, just so we can show the artwork.
I tried.
This was Dan's. Are you guys able to see this?
I didn't know we were like full on going hardcore. I would have tried a bit better.
See, Dan is a good artist.
And
I'm
we need
not.
him to design emotes for this channel.
I'm sadly not.
Oh, they'll
Here,
go to see
do
if
you
you
want
hold it
to-
up there.
Oh, there you go.
Buff
Here, I'll let you
Pikachu.
show this one a little better.
Yeah. Wait, is that a bleach thing?
Yeah, it's Hiyori.
That's awesome. I still got your Tanaka. I'm gonna frame it.
You're gonna
All
frame
right, so
my
let's go
drawing.
ahead
I
and move
drew
on
it
to the next one for the sake
work
of
when I was
time.
bored.